I'm happy to see all of you. As you've heard, my name is Shalom. I'm passionate about getting generations to connect with each other. So we'll be talking a lot from that point of view of how to get you connecting with the younger generation. And I like somebody called herself Mama Zero somewhere earlier in the chat. I'd say you're probably luckier than most of us because you will make less mistakes than some of us have made. And I mean, if you have children close to the ones that I have, they call you out. Teenagers will basically call you out. So today we'll just be talking about today's teenager and sharing some parenting tools. I know it's something that we cannot quite finish or cover as a whole, but I hope that whatever we'll cover today will be of value to you. So if I can get right into it, I like saying that today's teenager was not born a teenager. As Winnie was talking about her son, he's been my friend for God knows how many years. I mean, it's been long. But he didn't wake up one day and was 13, even if it feels like that sometimes. I mean, any parent of a teenager here probably feels a physical shift. It's almost like you're not warned when the transition was happening. But there are some signposts that basically show us that we are getting into this space. And I like looking at them from their different areas. Like now, for instance, physical. If we look at a physical signpost of your teen getting in there, their bodies go crazy. And if I can be free and open, when those boobs start popping, things go on in your daughter's lives. When the voice starts breaking, when hair starts growing in places and sometimes not in proportions that they want it to grow. We have conversations with my son about how his beard is growing. Sometimes they want it to be nice, big and bushy, and then it doesn't quite work out like that. So as their body is developing, curves are coming out, some more than they would like them to. Our teens are going crazy with already their own self-image. And then there's the emotional part, and their emotions are affected by hormones and bad habits. Because sometimes, much as we'd like to say, that's how they are, sometimes it's just a bad habit that started when they were young. And one way of looking at it is thinking about your child, your teenager, when they were like 3-4 years old, or maybe even 2. How are they behaving? And did that behavior carry on until now, such that as a teen they're behaving like a grown-up brat? It's to look at, have they managed their emotions? And then the other emotional thing that comes up when they're teenagers is crushes. They have crushes on this boy or girl. The crush lasts like 3 days and then it's over. And 1 minute they're your friend, the next minute they're so heartbroken and the world is over. So you're going to have situations where their emotions are going crazy and you have no idea what's going on. Unless, of course, they tell you, which comes to the third signpost, which is verbal. Now, when we look at the verbal signposts, you'll find some teenagers will talk more as they're growing older and more confident, and others will reduce the amount of talking that they're doing. And when I ask them what's happening, a lot of the time, their talking rate is determined by the interaction that they're having at home. So you'll find there are some teenagers who will talk so much in school because they're comfortable in school, but they will not talk that much at home. And when talking about the tools that we can use for parenting, I'll look into how you can take make, what is it called, survive such a situation when they're not talking. But when it gets to that point that they're not having conversations with you, I would say a lot of the time, listen by watching. Because even when they're not saying something with their mouths, they're saying something with their actions. They're saying something by the way they're behaving, responding, some attitude here and there. So listen out for those, because much as they may not be talking, they are communicating. It's one thing that I like saying, no matter who your teen is, they're always communicating, whether you understand that language or not, but they are communicating. Then socially, their friends change, and fortunately or unfortunately for many of us, we end up leaving that group of friends. What happens when a child is young? They're a hero. They consider you their hero when they're young, and they're not yet messed up by the world in terms of you have not disappointed them. You're still the master of the universe to a great extent. They may consider you a hero. But when they get into teenhood, they start having other heroes. And many of those come from their friendships, and it doesn't mean that your relevance has reduced. You're still relevant as a parent, but you're not necessarily going to be their friend. So at that point in time, they start bringing interesting friends into your into your home, into your area, into your space. And you may not like their friends, but that's something that we can talk about later.
Please mute.
But I like asking this. Are you able to name, and maybe this is something you can think about, if you feel like answering, you can answer on the chat. Are you able to name at least 5 of your teenagers' closest friends? And if you can name them, do you know what they have in common? Because a lot of the time, we complain or we try to give an opinion about their friends, and yet we don't even know who their friends are. Do you know their friends, and do you know what they have in common? And school cannot be the thing that they have in common. It needs to be an activity, a feeling, an attitude, a character trait. Those are some of the things that draw them to each other. School is just an environment that makes it possible. So look out for the social signposts where this is concerned. And then there's one big one that is spiritual. The spiritual identity our teenagers go through starts. We basically say that the window closes at around 14. If your child has not formed some spiritual foundation by the time they're 14, then they may be lost somewhere later on, and they will struggle more. And then high school and college comes in and starts giving them a definition. So for us as parents, we are supposed to walk with them, looking at them from the different spectra, looking at them from who they are physically, who they are emotionally, who they're expressing themselves to be, whether they do it verbally or not. And then socially, of course, and spiritually. So the thing to note is that much as you're the one observing, as Mas is saying, yes, they talk with their bodies and they talk with their mouths, really. They are living it. They are actually the ones going through all those changes. It's happening in their bodies, and many times they don't have a clue. You're going to have to buy clothes, and when you're when you're changing the clothes and buying clothes and they're growing out of them, because you see them every day, you don't quite notice the changes, but they outgrow everything so fast. They outgrow their taste. They outgrow a lot of the stuff that they used to like as they were children. So your role as a parent is really to understand them, to guide them, listen to them, and equip them. This means that you cannot be smoothing their way by removing obstacles. Because when you try to remove the obstacles that they're going to face, you're weakening them as a teenager. And my hope and prayer is that all of us are raising these teens to be well-adjusted and thriving adults. So we can't be removing obstacles for them, because they will face them later on in adult life without the skills of managing it. So our role is to understand, to guide them, to listen to them, and to equip them. And much as, yes, we're going to be having this conversation as a conversation, much later I'll share the notes and they can be passed on by Janet, but I wanted us to make this a lot more conversational than a PowerPoint presentation. But I'd like to ask you guys some questions, and I want to do it on menti.com. So I'd like to share my screen and get you to go to, if you go to menti.com, I've got just 2 questions that I'd like us to ask just to see who is here. All right? So let me share my screen. And let's have a bit of fun with this one. Okay, I think what you have there is a question that says, what is the age difference between you and your oldest child? Can you all see that? So what?
I will leave the group.
You can use your phone to do this. You don't have to use the laptop that you're on. Or you can use a different gadget. You just go to menti.com and enter the code that is up there. 510779.
Open a new window. Just from where you are, you can open from Google a new window, and you're able to still access it.
Yes, so you go to menti.com teenagehood.com. Yeah, I can see some of us are already answering. I'll give as many of us a chance, and I hope you're seeing the results, And it's just the age difference between yourself and your oldest child, not the younger ones. So in other words, what I'm asking is, how old were you when you got your first kid? Okay, let me give a few more seconds. Because this is a very important thing to think about when it comes to how you're parenting your teenager. If we look at the age differences we are seeing on the screen, I want us to imagine what a 26 to 30-year-old thinks, feels, their attitude, the support systems they have around them, what a 20-year-old has. The same thing for a 36 to 40-year-old. If you think about a person of that age and you try to imagine what is going on in their minds, then you take that to parenting, you will see the kind of effect you may have. So let's say you were 30 years when you got your first child. It means that by the time they're 13, you're 43 years old. So by that time, you're technically getting over the hill and you're thinking, gosh, retirement will be coming soon. Have I met my goals? Have I not met my goals? You're at that thing that people like calling halftime. And you're asking yourself some of those questions. And then you have this hormonal child who has come to bring you attitude. Just think to yourself what that would look like when it comes to parenting them. Now, when you're 36 to 40 years older than your child, and let's say, let me take the higher one, the 40-year-old. So you're 40 years old by the time you're getting your first child, which means that by the time they become a teenager, if you're a government worker, for instance, you're now heading to retirement. Now think about the dynamics of parenting a teenager when you're at that status in life. It can go crazy, isn't it? And so when it comes to talking about how do we parent teenagers, who we are really, really matters in this equation. It's not just about understanding the teenager, it's about understanding ourselves. And that's where I wanted to introduce the story about the parenting tools. You need to know, first and foremost, who you are and how you parent. I listened in on the morning session, and Dr. Mukolo talked very extensively about the different parenting styles. And if we look at them, and I won't go into them in depth because he already did, and I know you'll get the recording. But if you look at your parenting style, and then you add your age into that factor, you can see how you and your teenager will drive each other up the wall. Because a lot of the time as the teens are driving us crazy, we have a role to play in that whole story. So let me just ask another last question, still on Menti. And this one is about what you think parenting teenagers is. So still on that same code. Okay, it's taking a bit to share the screen. Parenting teens is. What do you think parenting teens is?
And off-roader.
Maybe Winnie is the one who might say a walk in the park. What did you say parenting teens is? Like, personally, I have a 6 year gap between two of my children. And so one got into teenagehood way before the other. And when you say confusing, if I could vote on this, I don't know which one I would vote for. But I think also it's different per teenager. Because for the first teen, I had an off road adventure. I'm only 23 years older than he is. And so for me, I was still young to a great extent when I got him. And so we were having an adventure through this story. But by the time I got the second one, basically, I was a bit confused because any rules I had played by with the first one, I had to throw out the rule book with the next one. So I became a very confused parent. And what happens is that now that they're young adults and the last one is turning 18 this year, they come back and tell me about my being unfair. This is how I was unfair, this is what I did wrong, and all that. But when I'm talking about parenting tools, I'll now stop the screen sharing and go back to camera because I want to show you a tool. This tool that I have in my hand is a penknife. Like every tool, if you have the right tool in the wrong hands, you're going to cause trouble because those hands don't know how to use it. If I gave this penknife to somebody who likes playing around and trying out things or being ready for whatever, they're going to have a very precious thing in their hand. If I hand it over to a teenager who thinks that robbing people is interesting, he's going to have a nice weapon that he can use. So when it comes to tools, I'd say for us as parents, the first most important tool is being aware of who you are and the chaos that you can cause. The authoritarian parent that Mukolo was talking about earlier this morning will expect obedience at whatever cost. That's okay when they are younger. It's not okay generally, but it is easier for you to handle when they are younger. When they come to teenagehood, what happens is they become rebellious, or you raise a doormat. You raise the kind of child who doesn't even know what they should do. They have to wait for instructions all the time. So think about the teen that you're raising based on how you're parenting. A permissive parent, as you had earlier, will allow anything and everything. And what ends up happening is that this child becomes manipulative or entitled. So we have teenagers that we are giving names and calling certain things, and yet we're the ones who created them. The uninvolved or negligent parent will basically raise a lost teenager. And then the authoritative one, who's loving and firm, as was called earlier, provides direction. So this one is the one who ends up raising a teen who's well adjusted. And so other tools that we'll talk about, and I want to let Misko also put in some words. I think I've talked long enough. Other tools that we can think about are dialogue, how to talk and listen, with more listening than talking when they get into their teenagers. Hobbies that you may have and that you share with them. Explore some of those things. A big tool that I use, and that is what Winnie intimated earlier, is the village. Who else are you raising your teenager with? Because truth be told, you will not be able to raise your teenager alone. It's not the kind of thing that you're expected to do on your own. It was expected for us to share. Misko is one of the people who has helped me raise my teenager because she's able to talk about post-school success in a neutral way. I have spent 18 years lecturing this girl about how she needs to do her life. But when Misko, a cool young lady, comes into that village and talks to her about how to succeed after school, she will be listened to a lot more than the mother. So one of the most important tools you can have as a parent of a teenager is a village around your child, other people who are speaking into your child's life. And then the fourth most important tool is reinforcement. You need to keep reinforcing the behavior that you want. So even as you're going into these parenting teens, some of you starting, some of you already there, whatever part of your journey you're on, you must kit yourself with the right things to walk this journey with them. So I think at this point I will hand over to, Mercy, I think, the moderator, and we can go on to Miss Call for a bit. Yeah.